did not know Yuan Qing before she joined the Chicago Symphony. So as soon as
So that
she,
would be, 1995.
since 1995, she's been my wonderful colleague in the Chicago Symphony.
It's
I
hard to
didn't know the
believe.
exact year, but it's these years pile up, don't they, Yuan Qing?
They do. It's hard to, I was just saying, it's hard to believe I've been in the orchestra for 27 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you just had your 40th. No, 50th.
50th. Yeah, I just retired officially last week, and after 50 seasons in the Chicago Symphony, and I was informed by the archivist of the orchestra that only 12 people have retired with 50 years of service to the orchestra in the history of 131 years of the Chicago Symphony. So I didn't know it was such a small number, but I'm very grateful for every year, for every season, for sure.
Wow, that's amazing. It's really
Yeah,
amazing.
it seems like a long time, doesn't it? In 2008, my wife, Sunny Mazer, read in the Evanston Review, a weekly newspaper in Evanston, where we live, that there was a new place opening up for music, and there would be a restaurant established within the building, and that the back of the building would be actually a club for musicians, actually like a country club. So this was a concept that you could pay dues, and for the what you would get out of those dues would be the possibility to present concerts, and make recordings. And so I took my younger daughter with me. The restaurant had opened. It's Union Pizzeria. It was then, and it still is now, a very fine restaurant. And we sat down and ate. I asked the bartender, I've heard about this concept for music, and tell me a little bit about it. Well, he said, you don't, I can't really tell you anything about it, but sitting across from you at the bar is one of the founders of this organization. So that was Stuart Rosenberg. So I chatted with him, and that same day got a brief tour of the music venue, which is behind the restaurant in the next section. And it was not complete. It was still under construction. And at that instant, I said, I would like to I may not have said it to him, but I said it to myself. I would like to establish a chamber music organization that could present concerts in this venue, because I felt there was nothing like it in Evanston, and it was unique to the area of Chicago, where it had a restaurant and a concert venue and a very nice lounge for musicians beyond the venue. It seemed to have everything that would have the makings of a successful opportunity. Now, this was in the summer of 2008, and I founded a not-for-profit with the help of Lawyers for the Creative Arts, which is a wonderful organization which helps musicians, actors, all sorts of arts organizations to establish themselves and to save money and time with expert legal advice to get started. So I got started. I took a short course in that, how you would found a not-for-profit. First, you have to incorporate with the state of Illinois, and then you have to get permission from the federal government, from the Treasury, the IRS, to declare yourself as not-for-profit. And we were able to quickly get that. By October, we had established all that. But we gave our first free concert in the summer of 2008, and I just used my mother-in-law's contacts. She's still alive. She's 101 years old, and she comes to concerts. And she had a lot of friends that love to come to concerts. And she had been a charter member of the Steppenwolf Theater when it was founded in the basement of a church in Highland Park. I had actually been to some of those early performances, so she'd been a board member, and so she had a lot of friends. And then we had newly bought a house in Evanston in 2007, and our next door neighbor had just moved in. Had been the head of the art department at the University of Illinois Urbana, and she knew everyone in the neighborhood. She gave me everybody's address, and I just started. And our early success was based on my mother-in-law's contacts and our neighbors' contacts, and some of those people are still coming to concerts. So that wasn't a very concise answer, but in 2000, now I said, had I known that the stock market was going to crash in the fall of 2008, would I have founded a not-for-profit and done this? Maybe I would have been cautious about doing that, but I had no idea about that. And so we just went ahead and did it without a great expectation. We didn't know if we would have one season or many, and we've had many, and we've been in business. We lost a little time with COVID. We lost more than a season, but we have bounced back, and here we are now presenting the Civitas Ensemble, and very proud to do so.
I remember conversations with Michael about what he had created when I was thinking about creating Civitas Ensemble, because we started the process about 3 years after you, 2011. So I was just dealing with my son's illness.
Yes.
And trying to think how I would channel my energy using music as part of healing and all that. So I was working on Civitas, and I was thinking about applying for a non-for-profit, and I knew what a wonderful job you had done with Dempster Street. So I think we were on tour, because I remember sitting next to you on a bus tour going from city to city. And then I asked you about how do you do this? How can you apply for this? You said you have to reach out to Lawyers for Creative Arts. And that's what I did. So I had the pleasure of working with Bill Redner, who passed away, I think 2020 during COVID.
Yep.
And he was such a wonderful person. That organization is also just amazing. And they recently helped us with reviewing the contract with a new venue. So it's really a gem for musicians and artists. Anyway, Bill was so kind. I just, we sat down like 2-3 sessions, and he went through the applications with me and worked on things. We also got our status really quickly, like within 2 months.
Yeah.
So it was amazing.
And the executive director of Lawyers for the Creative Arts moved. I mentioned a neighbor who was with the art department. He moved into that house. It's Jan Feldman. He's now the executive director of Lawyers for the Creative Arts. He lives basically right next door to us.
You have the best neighbors.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It's a nice neighborhood, and there's a lot of creative people and people that love Evanston, and they love to support what's going on in Evanston. And we couldn't have done it as I said, without my mother-in-law and with Sarah Krepp. She was the person that was in the art department, and she moved, but she still comes to concerts.
Amazing.
And she and her husband are contributors, very generous contributors to Dempster Street Pro Musica. So there's, that shows the loyalty that we were able to establish and continue. I think it's just by treating everyone personally, and we never have had a paid staff, and I never asked anyone to volunteer for Dempster Street Pro Musica, because I felt it wasn't that I needed to control it at all. It's just that I wanted to make sure that everything was done the way I thought it should be done, in terms of serving the community and providing the best possible concerts we could. And so literally, I know where everybody lives. I've almost got their addresses memorized, their emails. And we stayed small. So the same, just 3 board members, and we, uh, I handwrite every thank you note, every ticket order. Of course, I keep it on a record on a spreadsheet, and but it's right in this room. This is my home studio. It's where I practice the oboe, and this is the world headquarters of Dempster Street Club Music.
It
We have
just,
our business license on the wall, by
it's so funny.
the
I feel
way.
like, Michael, you're very unique in that way because it seems like you had the venue, which was brand new in 2008, and you also had your core supporters and audience. All you needed was music. For most of us, it's the other way around. We have the music
Yeah,
and we don't know where to play, and also we don't know how to get to people to
yeah.
spread the word.
I knew from the Chicago Chamber Musicians, we we played at Northwestern, we played at DePaul, and we played at other places, but we didn't have one set base. And that was a bigger organization. It needed more patrons. Um, the the venue of space is perfect for chamber music of a certain size, that it cannot hold comfortably more than about 150 people seated. It then when they have popular concerts, they'll have 200. They're allowed to have 250 people in there, but then they're all standing. But
Mm,
classical concerts, people don't stand up like in rock concerts. They need to sit down. And then the fact that there was a bar right in the venue allowed us to people to have refreshments. Now, now space has become incredibly busy. There are over 300 concerts a year there. But many times they're delivering food to people's tables while they're listening to music. That doesn't work for classical music. We have to have more concentration and quiet. So the only thing that we don't have waitresses taking orders. We just said the bar will be open before the concert and it will stay open for all of intermission. And then people can go and have a meal afterwards. And that worked great in the early years when we started our concerts at 4 o'clock, and they were always on Sundays. So we sort of had our pick of the days. It was not too difficult to schedule because they had maybe a 7 o'clock and a 10 o'clock show on Sundays of something else, but we could get in there. And then as we continued to play and they continued to grow, that was we were there too late, and they would have trouble setting up for the next show. So we went back to 3 o'clock and then 2 o'clock, and now we're always out in time. So had to the only thing we had to change is the start time, but I don't think we lost a lot of people because of that. And it's just been a great home for us. We've rarely played anywhere else. We've played at the Evanston History Center, and I think we did a mostly music concert at a lobby of a condominium once. We played one concert, which was a benefit for the Schulte Foundation, which I was a member of their board. We did that at the Music Center, Music Institute in
mm.
Evanston with Leonard Slatkin, and that was a bigger event with more people, and it was very successful. We raised quite a bit of money in one concert for the Schulte Foundation. So, but you're right, we had a home, and that's what I liked about the place. I said, we're not going to give a concert every month. We're going to give 3 or 4 concerts a year, and we've never tried to do more than that. And one thing that we did, which was very unique, was we played a few concerts for other not-for-profits. And that is sort of rare, but I think Civitas has done that too when you play for hospitals
Mhm.
and those types of situations. And the Evanston History Center, when I said, we'd love to play a concert for you, and you can invite as many people as you want, and some of our patrons will come, and we will give you the ticket money, and you'll get the proceeds from. They said, "What? You're gonna come play a concert and give us all the money that you make?" And I said, "Yeah, because you're important to Evanston." So That's what I learned from Deborah Sobel. It's called the generosity of spirit. And that's what she was all about. If you're generous to people, it will come back to you in a very good way. And
Hmm.
that's that's what we've tried to do. And I
We
know
did,
that Civitas is
yeah,
founded basically on the healing power of music, and you should speak more about your beginnings with that and how that all developed for you.
yeah. So I think in the beginning, very beginning, the goal was always to play for hospital patients because I felt that was something that I missed, having spent so much time in hospital waiting. Sometimes there's no end to it.
Right.
And so that's what we have been trying to do throughout the years. And we added senior homes as well. And now we're partnering with neurologists, creating 4 concerts a year for memory loss patients specifically.
Wonderful.
And to your point, also during COVID, it was so difficult to keep things going, and
Right.
Zoom concerts are just not the same. We actually, our very first concert, in-person concert with a very, very small audience, mostly was still done through Zoom, was a fundraising event for another non-for-profit that addressed food insecurity
Right.
for the South Side. And we were able to raise $2,000 for them. So, that felt good.
And didn't you have an advantage that Laurie Bloom was one of your founding members, and he and his wife had founded the Chicago Children's Theater? So they were cognizant of a small performing arts organization that they had founded before.
Yeah,
So,
Lori was very knowledgeable on so many
yeah,
levels, and we miss him as well.
yeah,
He's also a recent retiree. I can't believe it.
yeah,
But also, Lori's wife Nan had a different network of people, where
right,
actors and teachers from the other performing platform, not music, and we've done especially concerts for Children's Hospital. We've done it with colleagues of Nan, where stories put to music or narrator. And so that was really amazing. I think that added another really a different level, especially for concerts for families and children.
Were your first concerts at the what was called Children's Memorial Hospital back
So
then?
by the time 2012 came, Children's Memorial had already become the new Lurie Children's Hospital.
Okay, yeah,
So I spent so much time in the old Children's Hospital in Lincoln Park
yeah,
for more than 3 years.
yeah,
And so that building is no longer there, right? It's a
right.
condominium. Now, Lurie Children's Hospital is a wonderful space. We've also done quite a few concerts there, but the space is very, very, very different. So I recently did an event with Jeannie Gang, the well-known, famous architect.
Architect, yeah.
And yeah, so her team is building a children's, well, a wing for the Children's Hospital in New York. And they, asked me to share some of my experiences in terms of performing in hospitals for children, especially in Children's Hospital. How could they take that into consideration in the design process, which I thought was so interesting.
That's
And
great. I mean, doesn't that make you feel really wonderful that something you started could actually be thought of in the building of
yeah,
a new facility because the 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 healing power of music uh, for people that it might be underestimated the value of it, but you have proven through Civitas the great value of it, and that we as musicians, I think we have the greatest feeling about concerts we play when we know that we're comforting people. And after, I know, if you remember the tragedy in the nightclub in Paris several years ago where many people were lost their
2015.
lives, well, we played the next day, and I just had to get up and make a speech about uh, when you're performing artist and that facility is attacked by terrorists and people lose their lives, this hurts all performers throughout the world. We're just so saddened by this, and we dedicated our concert to their memory the next day. And I really, with tears in my eyes, was I read a quote, something that Leonard Bernstein said after John F. Kennedy was assassinated, the first concert that he conducted, about the healing power of the performing arts, that when we have no more words to express our sorrow, that's where music starts. It's so powerful when you run out of words of condolence and comfort. Music takes over and fills that need that
Mhm.
people have. And of course, our music director Ricardo Muti is a prime example of using music throughout the world in places that have seen a lot of tragedy and trouble. Like he went to Sarajevo, I know, after peace finally came to that sieged city, and he brought La Scala Orchestra, and they played together with what was left of the Sarajevo Orchestra. And I know a student of mine went to play in that orchestra later on. She wrote her doctoral thesis on that. 12 members of the orchestra were killed on their
Wow.
way to concerts. They played candlelight concerts to keep the spirit of the people up. And she wrote her whole dissertation on that because she had become a member of that orchestra, and she interviewed the players that have played. It was in the past for the orchestra, but uh, for Ricardo Muti to do what he did, and he's done it in so many places. He set such a great example for us all about the power and the healing qualities of music.
Yeah, so well put, Michael.
Thank
I
you.
think it's interesting how, each one of us in our own way is doing what needed to be done or what's necessary to be a musician. I think to know that our music is impacting people, it's just essential for us to keep that going.
That that's the thing. Music is not a luxury; it's a necessity. And I say that of all kinds of music. I don't limit that to classical music, which that's what we perform. But all kinds of music can help to unite people of many different backgrounds, nationalities, and I went to Interlochen in high school, and the theme of that whole place is music is an international language. And I know you have probably played in festival orchestras where there were many languages spoken, but music was the common language. And we can sit down with people that we can't speak with word to word, but we can make music immediately just by listening to each other and appreciating. And it's sometimes astounding how comfortable you can feel with people that you can't communicate verbally, but you can communicate through music. It just makes you think more about the importance of it. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity. One Ching played early on in our. I remember you did a Brandenburg Fourth Concerto, and I can't remember if we played the Bach Double together or we did something together, and then a few years ago we had what we called checkmates, and we had Civitas play as uh, your own ensemble with us at Dempster Street, and of course I I knew you so well. I knew Lori so well, and Ken Olson, the cellist. I didn't know Winston as well, but he has played on several concerts in the past, provided wonderful, extraordinary artistry as a pianist. And I knew that I was going to uh, retire around this time from the Chicago Symphony, and that I have reached the age of 73, and I just felt that we had put so much into this, and the people that have come to Dempster Street Pro Musica concerts have appreciated so well that the thought of just stopping was never contemplated. Then looking around, I saw some different chamber ensembles and situations that might be possible. But to me, Civitas represented the prime example of the purpose of the organization of developing community relations and providing comfort to people, as well as enjoyment and entertainment. Let's face it, we're in the entertainment business. Um, whether we like to admit that or not, we are entertainers, and it's our job to please and comfort. But one of the track record of Civitas, the quality of the ensemble, and then also that you have made yourself as a not-for-profit organization, because that's fits the mold of what we had done. There are other chamber ensembles, but they've never organized that way. And I just felt all the ingredients were there in Civitas. And so, as I know that I met with you a little less than a year ago, and with the three of you, Lori had moved away, and your core became a trio instead of a quartet, and we just had a discussion, and I think it came maybe as a surprise to you. Maybe you thought I was going to try to go on forever and ever, but what I've tried to do is to, for myself personally, is phase my retirement in step by step. So yes, I have retired from the Chicago Symphony after 50 years and after 53 years as a professional musician. But I'm still teaching 2 days a week in the Bienen School of Music at Northwestern. And I wanted to continue Dempster Street, but there was one thing that, and I didn't mention this, when I founded it, I had the example of the Chicago Chamber Musicians, which was 10 or 11 players that were all in the group. And if we had any inner problems, it was that individual players didn't feel like they got to play enough sometimes. And our concerts were somewhere where it would be a full concert, but maybe each person would only play on one piece or two pieces. And that created not dissension, but a certain amount of longing. I'm not going to say dissatisfaction, but longing for more opportunities. So with Dempster Street, I decided that there would be no set personnel and that each concert would be a project. And I might come up with ideas, but I would look to the Lincoln Quartet or Civitas, different discrete ensembles, and say, would you like to come and play a concert, and what would you like to play? And I think that's how your concert, the Checkmates, it came out of a recording that you made partially, I think. And for instance, one of our players who played a lot, well, the Avalon Quartet played, and I got to know Tony DeVroy very well. And so the Avalon came, and they played, and we expanded them, and we had some people play with them. I played with them in mixed wind and string. And then at one point I asked Tony, because he had succeeded Debbie Sobel in the Rush Hour concerts, which he so brilliantly founded. I said, would you like to do a concert? And what would you like to play? He said, well, I like to play the Loeffler Trio for oboe, viola, and piano. And I said, it's a piece I've played many times. Have you never played it? He said, I've never had the opportunity to play that piece, and it's a wonderful early 20th century, but sort of Debussy romantic type of piece. So that's how that became the second half of the concert. And it's just, I feel so blessed that I had a network of colleagues, not only in the Chicago Symphony, but in the community that I could reach out to for ideas. And it might be something that really appealed to them, just the spark of an idea, or they came up with the idea. And that's how we programmed. And it uh, almost by accident it developed. We were just really lucky that some of the ideas clicked, and um, more than 30 members of the Chicago Symphony have played on the Dempster Street
Wow.
series, and many have been played many, many times. And we had basically a regular woodwind quintet that played, and we did a project of playing the Arnold Schoenberg woodwind quintet, which is 40 minutes long, one of the most one of his earliest 12-tone pieces, one piece that's hardly ever played because it's so difficult to put together and so long and taxing on the audience, that we made a project of studying the piece for a whole season before we performed it. And that was partly, I have to say this too. I went to Marlboro Music Festival in 1971 when I graduated from Northwestern. And that was also an example of generosity of spirit, of rehearsing, not endlessly, but in a devoted way, without the actual prospect of getting to play a concert. So
Hmm.
rehearsing for the edification of the players for a piece that you might not play. So we taxed the audience with this Schoenberg, but they came. Well, we made it free too. That's always an advantage. but but they came,
That's
and
great.
they learned, and I didn't have to lock the doors when we started
Yeah, I
to
think
make
it's
sure
always
they
good to challenge the listeners a little, right?
right,
And it's a fine balance of giving them something they really like, and then
right,
throw something at them they might like and they might hate. And even if I find the same thing with reading a book, in book discussions in my book club, not everyone has to like the book to have a good discussion.
right.
Sometimes it's the book we detest that generates the best discussion. So I'm not saying they hated the Schoenberg, but I'm just saying that
No,
challenge is
we
always
did.
good.
Yeah, we did, and we made it with the Carl Nielsen Quintet and the Paul Hindemith Quintet, and they were all written within the same 3 years, but completely independently and of different styles, 1923 to 1924 or 25. And so it made a historical reference point, and we made it. I still thought if we do the Nielsen and the Hindemith on the first half, and then there's intermission, and then there's Schoenberg, people are going to leave. So I came up with an idea that we would start with the Hindemith, and we play the first two movements of the Schoenberg, and then have intermission. Because
Oh,
literally, it's almost too long for an audience to concentrate. And then we played the last two movements of the Schoenberg, and then the Nielsen.
huh,
And that
interesting.
kept them there. Now, I suppose that Arnold Schoenberg would have been very displeased if we did that. But this piece is so rarely played
Huh.
because, you can listen to a great string quartet or a quintet like the Schubert that might be 40 minutes long or longer. But woodwinds tend to, the sound tends to grate on people after a while. And when it's especially 12-tone music of Arnold Schoenberg, it's not everyone's cup of tea. So we came up with that idea actually only about a week before the concert. And
That's a good idea.
it worked.
So other than it's such a good sport to play that piece. What else did the musicians get out of playing that, like having finished it and said, oh, that was so worth it?
We got a great sense of accomplishment that we had learned the piece, and that we were able to not just play a rendition of it, we were able to play an interpretation of it, because it's filled with rubato and accelerandos and ritardandos. It's very romantic in its
Hmm.
outs, in its out, it's in sonata. The first movement's in sonata form. There's a scherzo and there's an adagio and there's a rondo. So we demonstrated aspects of the tone row for the people to be able to listen for it in different speeds and guises. And especially in the rondo, they could really pick it out when it came back, because it was a 5-part rondo. So the form was classical romantic form, but the harmonic language was, to our audience, very difficult to grasp.
Hmm.
But we felt that we did a service by playing it, and the 5 of us felt that we grew together over. We started in September, and the concert was until May. We got to play it twice. We got to play it on the Chicago Symphony Chamber Series, but in the Beverly Arts Center. It wasn't at Orchestra
Okay.
Hall. So we got to
Right.
play it. The concerts were a week apart, but the fact that we got to play it twice was also terrific, because after all that work, especially, we didn't have to rehearse the Hindemith and the Nielsen quite so hard, but we really put in a lot of time. And so the party afterwards was great.
Well, I think chamber music, it teaches us how to communicate using music. I think playing the orchestra is fantastic. We make music, we make the sounds that we can't make by ourselves. And you have 100 people or sometimes more on stage. But most of the time we're interpreting the music the way we're directed to. So I feel like chamber music definitely gives musicians more autonomy and ownership, as well as you have to understand how it fits into the music history, or even the composer, particular composition, the composer's life. And so it provides a lot of opportunities for us to learn, to grow as a musician. But other than that, for me, it's just such a great way to spend time with my friends and colleagues and fellow musicians. I mean, our rehearsals is a part personal time together, along with learning the music. And I don't know, right now we have a standing rehearsal on Mondays with Civitas members. So every
That's
Monday we meet
great. That's
11:30
great.
to 2, and whether we have a concert or not, we just read through literature. And it's a good way to spend my Monday, which is
Yeah,
my free day from the orchestra. I see Ken, I see Winston, and then I'll see Will soon because he's playing the Mozart quartet with us.
great.
And I, part of me also, I feel, Michael, I don't know if you feel that way. I feel like a lot of times I can hear somebody's playing, even if without knowing the person, I get a sense of what the person is like,
Right.
because our playing is such a reflection of who we are. And some people might be really, really shy on the social level, and then the way they play is super warm and open, and you get the sense, okay, there's this person I want to know more about.
Yeah.
So there's so much in chamber music, and the literature is so rich. You can go piano trio, quartet, quintet, you can build
Yeah.
on that. It's just amazing, I think.
I agree with everything you said. And of course, for string players and piano, you have some of the greatest works uh, that we have, um, available. Some of the like the Beethoven string quartets, they're without equal in many respects, and the Shostakovich string quartets, and
It's so hard though.
yeah,
string,
but
string
it's
quartet's a nightmare.
yeah, I know they are. Um, but the piano trio literature obviously is very rich and full.
Amazing.
And I think that as what Wen Qing said is very important, that when you play in an orchestra, you are uh, obligated to the interpretation of the conductor. And we're very fortunate in the Chicago Symphony that we work with the greatest conductors and we work with the greatest colleagues. Then when you work with people that you know in chamber music or new friends that you may meet, there's a collegiality, and you have to learn because there's no leader in chamber music. You're all equal, and you have to learn to be diplomatic. And if you feel strongly about something, you have to present those ideas in such a way that it's not never threatening to your colleagues, that you're doing this in a maybe firmly, but there's always this give and take of the discussion. uh, for instance, how fast or how slow is a movement going to be, or how much retard or accelerando are we going to make? And the interpretation of music is infinite. I mean, it becomes so subjective that we would throw out many ideas, but we would try. It gives you the opportunity to experiment with different ideas and to exclude things that don't work, but at least to try them. And I know many times with myself, I've had an idea and I said, let's do this. Let's phrase like this. And we try it, and then I'll say, what was I thinking of? That doesn't work at all, but thank you for trying, and let's not do what I just asked.
Mhm.
And you don't have that kind of time in an orchestra. The conductor is supposed to make a lot of those decisions, but within each section, there is a great amount of, with the bowing of the string parts, with the places that we breathe in the woodwind section, not only each section, but all four of the sections together. So we have to work out a lot of things in the orchestra during the intermission of a rehearsal, or before a rehearsal, or after a rehearsal. And I think I must say that the Chicago Symphony is an orchestra that comes early and stays late, and we do whatever we need to do because the conductor cannot control and hear everything, and internally we can hear a lot of things that we take responsibility for and we correct. And in chamber music, it's all your responsibility because you are, in a sense, each person is somewhat of a soloist, and but they have to conform and work together smoothly with the other people in the group. So it's another aspect of music that's very fulfilling and important in the development of a musician and in the enjoyment of a career in music.
To your point about different tempi, um, we're working on the program for October 9th.
Yeah,
So the first reading was a few weeks ago on a Monday, regular Monday.
yeah,
And the last time the three of us played the Schubert B flat was many, many years ago,
okay,
probably in the beginning of our Civitas time.
yeah,
So this is revisit. And of course, I looked at my part, I practiced, and the last movement, dim, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, so I had a tempo in my mind. And of course, we started and it was frantic, but it didn't feel frantic when I played alone, you know?
right, sure,
So I, after the rehearsal, after the reading, it's also the how it fits in, right? So
right,
my own part sounded totally okay, and it's a good tempo. I think when I played actually a good tempo for the group, it felt slow to me, so I had to work at it to feel like, where is the compromise? So
yeah,
today I practiced a little, and I set the metronome also just to check, and I tried a different tempi just so that I could mentally prepare any tempo that I could play. You
Right.
know, sometimes you get stuck in your head about a tempo which feels good, and this feels good. And if it's a little slower, it already feels awful.
Right.
So in my
There's a
practice,
range. There's a range. It
yeah,
can be too fast or too slow. Sometimes the range is very small. Sometimes it's a little bit wider. You can, it's flexible. It doesn't,
it is
you're not
flexible.
keeping the same. And I think the Schubert, as I listened to it and put together program notes, is so interesting because I didn't remember. I'd heard it before. I may have heard the other trio, the E flat,
E
more
flat.
often, but the fact in the last movement that as a rondo, the time signature changes in the episodes. Yes, it goes from 2/4 to
Two,
three
four,
two.
two. Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
But
and
yeah,
I didn't know, and this is partly what I hope to ask you on Sunday when we have our little discussion. I didn't know of another rondo in the classical period that did that.
yeah,
Because usually it's just thematic and it stays in the same time signature in Mozart, Beethoven, Haydn when you have a rondo. Well, Beethoven can be a little more adventuresome, but this was
yeah.
mapped out 3 times, I think, the 3/2, 3 or 4 times. And is that unusual in a rondo?
I, yeah, I think it's very unusual. And
Yeah,
when we look at the 2/4, what it means versus what 3/2, what it
yeah,
means, it's literally miles apart. But in
yeah,
this case, it's quarter note equals quarter note.
yeah.
So how do I shift my mind into saying, okay, I just went from 2/4 to 3/2? You
Do you
know,
think of it as 1/2?
well, even the 2/4, I think as in one.
Yeah, so yeah. And so
So basically 1 to 3 or
yeah,
something
right.
like that,
But I
right?
mean,
So
it's like 1/2 time and 3/2 time.
right,
Because it's 1/2 note and then it's 3 half notes.
right. But
And
but
so
when you think about it, he didn't really write 1 2.
I know he didn't.
So did he want us to think more in two, and then the big three comes? I don't know. But in terms of checking tempo, I was just setting it in the same tempo,
Yeah,
and the especially the 3/2 section, it's funny, it feels slow even though it's
y-
exactly the same quarter note.
okay, yeah,
So even just because you think more into, or maybe it's not one and one and one, it's more 1 2 3, because
yeah.
the phrasing goes to sort of 1 2 3 and
Oh,
one
yeah.
two three.
So
So
maybe on Sunday we could do an example of one of the transitions when it changes and see if the audience can discern what's happening. Would you be
yeah,
amenable to that?
sure. I
Showing
mean,
it, showing it, and then explaining how the big beat has changed, but the quarter note has stayed.
it would have to be a very noticeable, physical gesture,
Right,
because the small thing stays exactly the same, as you know.
exactly.
So even the transition is so, this is kind of genius, the way,
Yeah, it is a genius.
yeah,
That's
it's
for sure.
it's sort of,
And
it's
it's
seamless, and then only if you look at it,
right.
what's
And
going to be.
possibly when I listened to the B flat trio before without, because I did a YouTube and I had the score, how some of the YouTube is with a
Right.
score. And I was astounded to see this.
Oh,
And I don't think I'd ever seen that in a classical period before. That,
yeah,
and then the other thing is that with the notturno, that the harmonic relationships are also visited in the slow movement, that he finally wrote for the B flat trio. It's in E flat, but it visits E major and C major.
yeah.
So there's big similarities. It's like detective work.
Yeah.
They think that the notturno might have been the first go round for the slow
That's
movement, and
so
then but that 6/8 movement is absolutely gorgeous
so
in the
beautiful.
Schubert trio. That is the tranquility and the
Yeah.
the flow of that music is, that is
Awesome.
genius. It is just so, so beautiful.
I think it's an amazing program, but we were just commenting. It's so beautiful, but it's so difficult, and
Yeah,
it's so simple when you look at the way it's written,
right,
and it's the hardest thing to play because everything is so transparent. So every little imperfection is going to show.
right.
And same thing goes for the Beethoven,
Oh,
Opus 1.
yeah.
And that's also in terms of kind of phrasing and how it's written, it's tricky. It's really
Yeah,
tricky.
yeah.
So, and the Schubert is a oh, gosh, one really has to spend hours to practice to clean the intonation and bow control and everything. Otherwise, it
A
sounds like
lot
an
of people
amateur.
think a lot of people think that we all have all this talent, and this is just everything's easy. But I, you remember Richard Cantor, Dick Cantor? He said one of our goals is for to sort of make it seem like it's easy, and that people in the audience would say, "Oh, I could do that because it sounds so easy." But try doing it and try spending your whole life to, it just keeps us young and keeps us working and inspired because we have these great pieces to play, and they don't play on their own. They have to be absorbed, and the detail. I mean, I was teaching this week, and we were working on little bits of ornamentation in an etude, but it's really an etude written in the time of Verdi, this book of etudes for the oboe. And the oboist that wrote them played in the Covent Garden Orchestra. He was French, but he played a lot of Verdi and Donizetti and Bellini in the 19th century. And I said, this is just like Verdi. And every time you play the trill, it's on different notes. And it has to sound, it's not really a trill, it's a mordent in this on the second 16th note of 4/16. Dum da da dum da da, that sort of thing. And it goes into all different keys. And I said, the granular detail of that every time you play it, it's a different fingering, but it has to sound just as
Same.
easy, and the facility of it cannot be betrayed. And the student was sort of like looking at me, but it's just a trill. I said, no, you don't understand. You don't understand how hard you have to work
Yeah.
at this. And I said, if you had to play this at an audition behind a screen, the people out front are going to be listening to every trill and how it's executed. It just has to be right. And that's the kind of dedication you have to have almost to every note
Yeah.
that you play.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way it is to play Schubert
Yeah,
and Mozart and Haydn and early Beethoven.
right.
That's so, in some ways, yes, Tchaikovsky is harder, but in many ways, it's actually somewhat easier because there are things are more in transition and you can be
Right,
expressive. You can have a
right.
little more vibrato on one note than the other. In those, very, very classical repertoire, it's hard, but it's kind of good to go through that, right? Because you feel
Yeah.
good after that. It's clean up
Oh, yeah.
all the dust. So,
But I tell people, students especially, I said, the oboe parts to the 9 Beethoven symphonies, almost you could just sight read them if you're a good college player. Maybe some things in the Ninth Symphony might be a little harder, but I said, in my whole life of playing these 9 symphonies, there's nothing more difficult than getting it right in Beethoven. It's extraordinarily difficult, even though the notes themselves are not. It doesn't. You don't have to have the greatest technique in the world, but you have to have the best musicianship to come up to the level of Beethoven. And it's the same for Mozart, same for Schubert. But I think Beethoven, almost to me, is the most difficult. It might just be my personal observation, but it seems on a level the execution has to be even higher in Beethoven. The demands are there.
Mm. This year we have, probably the most concerts we've ever had in one year, and plus we have the partnership with a neuroscientist to have 4 concerts for the memory loss patients. So it's going to definitely keep us busy, and I think our programming is very interesting. Thinking a little further, I'm thinking about recording projects, and as we talked about Schoenberg, I really like to support and to record pieces that would include living composers. And to that, even the 2 CDs that were produced in the past few years, both included living composers. And the second one is solely dedicated to Chinese, American, Chinese, Canadian composers. So I am already in contact with some composers trying to put together a convincing program, and probably one that reflects our time, that especially COVID, and a lot of composers were very productive because they didn't really have to have a venue to produce. Like us, we had to shut down. Michael, you had to shut down,
Right.
and in a way that it's harder for performing arts to survive in a pandemic like that.
Right.
But for writers and composers, they were very productive and prolific. So I'm contemplating a recording project, and it's almost complete, including compositions that came to life during that period.
Nice.
And I think projects always excite me, so we'll have to see where that takes us. I have few project idea, collaborating with musicians other than classical music, because I always find that part inspires me personally a lot. I can't improvise, so to be with musicians who can improvise, it's just amazing, so thrilling.
And Michael, how do you envision where the Dempster for Musica is
Well,
headed?
we have our first concert. We had a very lovely free concert, and unfortunately Ken Olson got COVID, and without blinking, Yuan Qing and Winston came up with a program, and it was beautiful, and people loved it. And I know they're very much looking forward to hearing Civitas as a trio this coming Sunday, and we're very excited that they're playing, and we love the progression of guest artists from 3 to 4 to 5 players that we'll see over the course of the season with February 12th and April 30th concerts. So we are transitioning into presenting, and we've never presented a set ensemble the whole year, so it's a little bit different, but the music's wonderful, and I think the audience is getting to know the players of Civitas, and they will get to know their guests. And we're just very excited for the year, and hope that the subscriber base continues to grow, and doing everything we can to encourage people to continue with Dempster Street, and finding some new audience members too.